Welcome back. You tuned into Salam Media, and now educational insights are my favorite because, as everybody knows, I'm passionate about all matters educational and always looking for new advice and tips in terms of assisting our children on the educational journey to become responsible adults as well as contributing productive members of society. And today I'd like to speak. I'm so pleased that I have somebody who is an expert in STEM education. I've got brother Abdul Esakjee, and we are talking everything STEM. Yes, parents, 2, 3 years ago, STEM education was introduced as part of the schooling curriculum. So STEM technology, and then last year, Department of Education changed the acronym to STEAM to include the art component as well. But and then so today we're going to learn everything regarding to STEM as well as all the buzzwords around coding and robotics and things like that. And how do we prepare for our learners for a STEM education, especially in light of the fourth industrial revolution? And I think I've got an expert in this field because brother Abdul Esakjee comes from an engineering background, and he's now helped us to understand this in layman terms. So for parents and listeners out there, once you hear STEM, you no longer have to be afraid. So let me welcome him and we can just ask him, Assalamu alaikum, brother Abdul Razak. Welcome to Educational Insights here on Salam Media.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah for having me on your show. I'm super excited to share insights on STEM education and what it actually means for us as a.
Let me just see. We're getting brother Abdul Razak back. Okay, so you're back. We momentarily lost you, but you're back. So you're saying you would like to provide us with insights on STEM education.
Gee, I'm super excited to share the insight, especially in terms of what it means for us as a country and at community level as well.
So tell me, you founded an organization, a STEM institute. Tell us a little bit more about why a need for a STEM institute and the name of the organization.
Okay, so myself and my wife founded Utyala Stem Institute in 2018. One of the key reasons why we founded this institute was because of discrepancies that we found in the working environment or in industry. So what happened was we get graduates in and we almost need to spoon feed them in order for them to do tasks which they are typically trained to do in their undergrad education. Right. So we did some research now to figure out, what is the issue behind, what is the underlying problem? And it turned out that based on the research that we did, there's a disjoint in the education system, not just in South Africa, but globally, where learners are taught content in silos.
Brother Abdul Razak, can you just speak up a little louder so that we can listen to you? Yes, shukran.
Is that better?
That's better.
I hope. Okay. So what I was saying was that the fault line was in the education system, not just in South Africa, but globally. The trouble is that learners are taught content in silos. So you see mathematics as just mathematics and science just as science. But when you come into the real world, so when you come into industry, you need to apply this thing in a multidisciplinary fashion. Purely because the real life problems are multidisciplinary in nature. So we identified STEM education as a potential solution to actually fill up this void. STEM represents science, technology, engineering, mathematics. It was a concept that was developed around 2007 in the United States, and they developed this methodology to address an industry problem. So there are many variants around it. So you get STEAM, as you mentioned earlier, where A represents the arts. You get STEMI, where I represents innovation. You also get STREAM, where the R component represents robotics. The way we see it is that instead of analyzing STEM from an industrial level, we analyze STEM from a fundamentals level. So if you talk about robotics, it's a subset of technology represented by the T. If you talk about innovation, it's a subset of engineering. If you talk about art, it's also a subject of subset of engineering. So if you think of Leonardo da Vinci, for argument's sake, he's well known for painting the Mona Lisa. He's well known for painting the Last Supper. What people don't know is that Leonardo da Vinci was an engineer as well. He
Absolutely,
developed flying
100%.
machines. He developed a bridge that doesn't need any nails. So, in order for you to be innovative, to be creative, the arts are inherently part of engineering. Hence, we've taken this as an all-encompassing solution specifically for the South African context. And having said that, that's why we established Utyala Stem Institute to develop critical, cognitive, and independent thinkers so that when they get integrated into society and into the workforce, they can become that much more productive and that much more innovative to solve South African problems using meta knowledge that they develop through our institute.
So let's go right to the beginning. Just what is STEM education? So what do you define STEM education is? And let's just, for the benefit of our listeners joining us just now, or those that are still have kids that are probably in preschool and that and did not hear the acronym STEM, or the first time hearing the acronym STEM, let's discuss this. What does the acronym stand for, and what is essentially the essence of STEM education?
Okay, so STEM represents science, technology, engineering, mathematics, right? Um, in terms of a methodology or as a concept, traditional education sees all of your different subjects as separate standalone entities. So you will write a mathematics exam, you'll write a physical science exam, you'll write a natural science exam, and so on. What STEM education does is it takes all of these subjects and teaches kids how to apply this in a multidisciplinary fashion. So in order to solve a real life problem, you would take concepts that you would learn in natural science or in physical science and blend them together to develop a solution for this problem. That whole aspect of thinking in a multidisciplinary fashion is the void that STEM education actually fills in the current or in the traditional education system. So in essence, STEM promotes one's problem-solving ability, multidisciplinary thinking, as well as using right brain creativity coupled with left brain analytics to develop whole brain thinking. That in essence is what STEM education offers.
So a holistic approach, because that's what I find fundamentally one of the problems for me in our, I mean, the curriculum is, you call them silos, I call them compartments, and I feel that that's how we taught. We taught in compartments and we compartmentalize them, and I find learners, they don't see it as interdependent and integrated. So whatever they learn in mathematics stays in mathematics, whatever is learned in chemistry or physics belongs there, and they don't see the whole, because they taught the sum of the parts, but they don't see it as the sum of the parts. And like I say, your name for this is silo, I call it compartments. And that what STEM does is actually an integration process. So to train children to see the engineering in a topic, the mathematics aspect in the topic, the technology and the innovation in something. So basically to fully immerse yourself in a holistic way of educating, which essentially is what education should be, a holistic way of introducing whatever is in our lives to our children.
Sure.
And then, now let's move on to, everybody goes for whatever is the latest trends and the buzzwords, and we want to do whatever we, all right, we mean well. Everybody wants the best for their children. It comes from a good place in terms of, we hear there's something new current happening, this is trending. And that, so at the moment the buzzwords are coding and robotics. But how do we integrate this, and how do these serve as beneficial for our learners, the coding and the robotics, and is it for everybody? Is robotics and coding for all learners?
Of course. So when we look at coding and robotics as a standalone, um, the research that we've done suggests that it is absolutely beneficial, especially for our current generation who is going to take up the jobs in the near future. However, it needs to be seen as a means and not as an end. Let me just unpack that quickly. So, following up to your question of whether it is for everybody or not, if you see it as just as a tool or being trained to be a good coder or being trained to be a roboticist, yes, it might not, you know, be favorable to all people. However, if you look at the underlying principles in coding, so the logical thinking, the sequential methodology that needs to go into writing a program. And then if you look at robotics, where you're considering motion and movement, the underlying principles behind that, those are the type of elements that need to be drawn out, which would then become very beneficial for current learners going forward. For interest's sake, in my capacity as a as a commissioner in the Presidential Commission of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, I assisted the Department of Basic Education in developing the coding and robotics curriculum, which is going to be rolled out in 2021. Part of the key elements that we incorporated into this coding and robotics curriculum is the problem-solving ability, the creative and conceptual thinking, and the systems engineering way of thinking. So for example, if somebody wants to pursue a career in in HR or human capital, mathematics is not necessarily a prerequisite for that. However, take the underlying principles in mathematics, where you need to state things in a logical sequence. Those principles then become so much easier to develop an organizational structure. So you reduce waste, you reduce overemployment, you reduce redundancy in positions. That's just one of many examples of how concepts in mathematics, as an example, can be incorporated into multidisciplinary professions.
And I'm just seeing, as you're speaking, like I'm seeing again, we come back to integration and holistic education. It's soon, I think, the way it's going in terms of, and we're preparing our learners for even jobs or careers and vocations that are still going to be designed for them. There might be positions opening up in 20 years' times that we don't have or understand currently. But like you say, if your brain pathways are mapped that way and trained in thinking that way, then you already, like you say, it's a means. They're already there because their minds have been trained. The mindset is there. So it's all about the mindset, and the way I'm foreseeing in terms of educational trends, subjects as we know it today, standalones like mathematics or just uh, engineering and these subjects on its own, it's no longer going to be alone. Just as how we economic science management, your accounting and your economics have now been combined in economic science management. STEM is achieving to do just that in terms of your subjects changing to be integrative. So you'll have your mathematics component at the same time, you will have your physics component there, introducing your technology component all in one. So I think structures will change, and it will be more inclusive learning, more holistic learning, and more integrated learning. And as we're speaking, everything you see, that is basically the core of STEM and what you're trying to achieve. But if I look at the current schooling system as we have the revised CAP syllabus, yes, introducing this is being at a very elementary stage. There must be surely a void in terms of wanting to pursue a career in STEM, and what you came through with your schooling in terms of what you understood, and how big is that gap?
Okay, so towards the middle of last year, as part of the commission, we had a meeting with the Director General of the Department of Basic Education. At that point in time, they took the South African CAPS education system and did a benchmark test to see whether it is suitable in terms of the future skills requirement as prescribed by the World Economic Forum. The results came back showing that on paper or in principle, the CAPS system is one of the most robust education systems in the world. Now, where we drop the ball as a country is the implementation of the CAPS curriculum. And that is through the admission of Director General Mweli. So in terms of where that void is, basically comes through in the implementation of the CAPS curriculum. Hence the introduction of coding and robotics as an additional subject into the CAPS curriculum in an attempt to fill that void. So as you mentioned previously, is that the future world of work is going to require a multidisciplinary approach in terms of individuals' chain of thought and incorporating coding and robotics as well as other 4IR technology enablers. This is what's going to give the individual the competitive advantage or the competitive edge for them to be integrated efficiently and successfully into the future world of work.
Absolutely. I'm just hung up on everything you're saying because I have like so many thoughts that you can see the educator in me who's so passionate in terms of that, because like you say, the curriculum is a solid curriculum. You use the word robust in terms of the curriculum and where we need to be in terms of supporting our learners, but for various reasons, the implementation, and I think also educators are struggling because especially those that were not trained in this type of curriculum, and that it needs a lot of professional development in terms of training our educators, in terms of the system and what is required in terms of educators that are proficient in robotics, in engineering, in coding, and in these subjects here, and also those that are in the field to upskill them. So basically, your human resource in terms of your educators need to be upskilled to actually be able to implement the syllabus. Am I correct in my assessment that part of it is our educators need to be upskilled? Because if you look at the current university training and what they're doing in there in terms of the subject offering and what is required now, there's a gap there in terms of upskilling the educators.
Yes. So you essentially hit the nail exactly on the head when you said that there's this gap in terms of upskilling educators as well. Because it's well and good that we have this brilliant curriculum, but if the implementation thereof falls short, it doesn't help anybody. So coupled with the conversation that we had with the Department of Basic Education, they are also in talks with the Department of Higher Education and Training in terms of modifying the B.Ed curriculum in order to incorporate additional subject matter or additional courses to get educators up to speed with how to use 4IR technologies as an enabler. Before that actually happens, we all know that curriculum takes about 2 or 3 years for it to be green lighted and implemented. What we've done at Utyala Stem Institute is we've developed what we call like a masterclass, where if an educator requires to be upskilled in how to use these technologies, we offer training sessions to them at a very fundamental level, to an extent where it's not, where the technology is not seen as intimidating and daunting, like, oh my goodness, I can't really do this. Case in point is we taught teachers in their mid-50s how to do 3D printing in 3 hours.
Okay, so I'll definitely then be able to qualify to do this, because you know what, I like speaking. I'll do things. I see myself more as an arty type, using that part of my brain. But when it comes to technology and engineering and that, I feel I'm that way challenged. I'm that person who can comprehend the manual to assemble a bicycle or to assemble something, but I just can't see it. I don't know. The logic escapes me. I can see logic and reasoning when I speak, and when I have to form an argument, but when it comes to engineering things, so if a 50-year-old individual can do something like that, then I definitely need to come there to learn and upskill myself, because I just heard today, especially now with lockdown and that, there's no excuse for not knowing. It's just you got to learn and you've got to keep up with this technology. So whether you're 5 or 50, there's no excuse. You need to know different applications. You need to get your brain STEM tuned. So while I have a lot of the STEAM part of it, we have to get the STEM tuned. Now, I mean, this is for educators. What about learners that are struggling? Because now you said in 3 years' time, and you get and by the time this thing is implementing and knowing how departments work, and I have a bit of insight in that. I can only see this happening maybe now in about 4 or 5 years' time, where it will be implemented in terms of resource base, and you're getting your human resources also at that level. In the meantime, uh, the fourth industrial revolution is here, and I think with the advent of COVID, it's just moved a notch five now, because people are trying to work remotely. We are trying to replace technology where human interaction was once there, in terms of everything going electronic and everything. Now you need people behind the scenes to have this operating system and to operate this. And
Yeah.
obviously, every youth, especially those grade 10s to matrix, we need to tell them, listen, this is now how you're going to go in terms of your career prospects for the future. So how do I give my child that head start, and if I'm afford to and able to give them that head start in terms of wiring their brains to think in terms of integrated learning solution?
Okay. So in terms of STEM education, and specifically the way we implement it at Utyala Stem Institute, point number one is that we inculcate a culture of lifelong learning, which is absolutely key. So just as you mentioned previously, that now during this COVID period, there's no excuse for anybody not to learn something, right? What we've done is we've incorporated this culture of lifelong learning through developing critical, cognitive, and independent thinking skills. Those are the underpinnings of what we do at Utyala STEM Institute. So, for example, if the fifth industrial revolution comes through, that individual has been trained to be dynamic enough to adjust and adapt according to the changes that life would bring towards them. So, for example, let's take COVID-19 for argument's sake. It was a serious issue last year, November or December. South Africa wasn't, at that point in time, adequately preparing themselves for COVID-19 coming to our shores and lockdowns being implemented. So the education system was on the back foot. Industry was on the back foot. If a critical mass of our country was trained to be critical, cognitive, and independent thinkers, they would have foreseen the effects of COVID-19 in South Africa and been proactive instead of being reactive. I think from my personal experience, we would have been in a much more comfortable position as societies, as communities, and so forth, had we had a critical mass of people who were proactive. Proactivity in terms of changing the landscape of communities and of regions and of countries typically comes from being a multidisciplinary thinker. It comes from being a critical, cognitive, and independent thinker. So having your child exposed to a STEM environment at a young age would most definitely pay dividends in the future. And you can be rest assured that irrespective of the conditions going forward, they would be adequately trained to be dynamic to changing towards these different environments.
I am so loving what you said in terms of, and you make a lot of sense in terms of us being proactive, in terms of us cognitively, like you say, it's all about calculated risk that you apply yourself. I mean, just like an actuary would do, but in terms of training your mind, and like you say, it's dynamic enough to alter your landscape and your way of thinking. And we need individuals now in society to do that. So, I mean, we're sitting with COVID, but yes, we can work around it. COVID is just like this hole. We can build a bridge over and we move forward. I said bridge, I was going to say walk over, but just so you know what, I can be favorable in your language. We say we erect a bridge. Yes, we erect a bridge here. See, I'm learning. I took notes. I already took notes in this. I think I'll make a good student. Even though I'm older and may pass my sell-by date somewhat, but I am there is hope left here.
As long as you're
So
young at heart,
you
you'll always be able to learn.
yeah, and I think I just train my mind now to I learned so much in this past 3 months. I don't know if there's any more space left. But anyway, we're building this bridge and we change. So that's what I said maybe a month and a half ago on educational insights that and I think from April, when we didn't even know what we're heading, and we almost now at 100,000 confirmed cases, is for us to survive now, we have to be resilient as individuals, and we will have to adapt and change our thinking patterns and strategy. And that's the only way forward. And this is for anything, any challenge or anything that we're going to be faced with. It's our ability to get out of our comfort zones, be dynamic and resilient. In fact, I know part of the STEM ethos is there's no such thing as your comfort zone because you need to continuously challenge yourself. So you don't get comfortable in one space. Because as long as you have this blueprint of thinking, and this is how I think, anything is just a challenge how to overcome this challenge. So you have to then apply your mind to find ways to overcome whatever constraints are placed in front of you. So like I say, if it was building that bridge, then I need to build the bridge and first test my ground to see what kind of ground I have. So I have to build a bridge that is going to withstand my constraints. So it's looking like this. What we caught up with time now. Where do we find you in terms of a website and all the information for parents who'd like their kids to just have this gap or fill in this void in terms of this type of thinking?
Sure. So our website is www.utyalasteminstitute.com. We've got a bunch of information on there in terms of STEM education, the fourth industrial revolution, the type of service offerings that we have. In addition to that, so Utyala Stem Institute has been awarded to be a host of the Make X 2020 competition. So it's a competition that's hosted from Shenzhen in China.
And okay, what I'm going to do, hold that thought. I'm going to get you on another edition of Educational Insights because that's now piquing my interest. So before we do that, I'm going to get you on and then you can tell us all about this competition and how can we get involved. So parents out there, please visit Abdul Razak's Esakjee's website in terms of his Utyala STEM Institute, and all the information will be there. And inshallah, we will get him on another segment of Educational Insights to tell us about this in Shenzhen, this whole expo, inshallah. Jazakallah for giving us your time and joining us here on Salam Media and Educational Insights.
Barakallah, Jazakallah for having me. I hope it was insightful and informative as well.
Definitely. Shukran. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We're going to go for a short break and we come back competitions with Ahmad Kathrada Foundation as well as one of the previous winners, Jaden Farouk.